Okay, I can't see that there's anybody else waiting. People could be filtering in, so I'll just kickstart. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. It's great to have you with us today. My name is Kelly Rolls, and I am a lead quality manager here at MAPS. You will also hear from some of my other colleagues today on this call, and they'll introduce themselves when they get to today's sections a little bit further on. Before we get started, I just wanted to walk you through a quick bit of housekeeping. The next slide, please. Great, thank you. So please do pop any comments or questions in the meeting chat as we go. We'll keep an eye on those throughout the session. Your cameras and microphones are currently muted, but we'll turn them on later when you head into your breakout rooms, and there'll be certain points throughout the session where you'll be able to ask questions. So we'll make sure that you've got access to that. We really want to make sure that we are having some interactive discussions, so there will be space for you to engage with those. This session is being recorded, so you'll be able to access it afterwards should you wish to revisit any of the content that we talk about today. And finally, the slides will be shared after the webinar, so you don't need to worry about taking screenshots or notes. Okay, so I thought it would be useful for us to just get a bit of a sense of who is in the room today. So if you could take a moment to join this Slido activity, then that would be really good. So you've got two options. You can either scan the QR code, which should be on your screen, or you can head to slido.com and enter the code that's there, which is 4018128. I'll just make sure that Slido is open for you. I'll just give you a few seconds just to be able to access that. Okay, I can see votes coming through on there. So thanks very much for filling in that. That gives us a bit of an understanding of the mix of experience within the session. So whether you're delivering advice, managing teams, working in quality assurance or supporting service development is handy for us to know who's contributing today. While you are doing that in the background, because I can see those votes coming in, I think it'd probably be useful for us to move on to see what is in the session that we have ahead of us today. So here's a quick look at what we'll be covering this afternoon and how the session will run. We'll start with a short welcome and scene setting, just to give some background and context around commissioning, the MAP standards and what we've heard through engagement so far. Then we'll move into 3 interactive workshop sessions. The first one focuses on quality assurance, exploring what assessing debt advice looks like and how it's achieved in practice. Then after a short comfort break, we'll come back for workshop 2, which looks specifically at training needs, thinking about the people, skills and systems needed to deliver quality services. Then finally, we'll move into workshop 3, which is going to focus on customer experience. So what great client experience looks like and how it can be measured and maintained over time. And finally, we'll wrap up by summarising key themes, reflecting on what's been discussed and outlining next steps. So overall, we hope the session will be a mix of information, reflection and discussion, and we'd really like it to be as interactive as possible. So we encourage you to interact as openly as you can. Okay, moving on to our objectives today. So based on the session outline that we've discussed, we really want everyone to have a clear understanding of MAPS's expectations and standards for community-based debt advice, particularly around quality, customer experience and training. We'll also be sharing and exploring ideas on how quality can be assessed in a way that aligns with the MAP standards. Another key part of the discussion will be recognising what training, support and capability are needed to deliver a consistent and high quality service across the board. We'll then move into what really drives an excellent customer experience and discuss some practical ways to measure and maintain it. And again, just to reiterate, today is very much about collaboration. We want to hear your ideas, your insights and experiences, because we believe all of this will help to shape the quality assurance approach for this service moving forward. Okay, you might have thought your Slido's activity was over, but we've got another one on the next slide for you. This one is a little bit more of an icebreaker type Slido. I know that we've already kick-started, but I'll just open that now. So again, if you've still got Slido open, just add in the new code, which is 2328888, or again, you can just scan the QR code on the machine, on the screen there. So if your clients could describe your service in just one word, what would you hope that word is? Now, this could be something that reflects perhaps how you want them to feel, or maybe what you would want them to take away from their experience with you. So I'll just keep an eye on the Slido in the background, and then I'll show you some of the words that are coming through on the word cloud there as they start to filter in. Sorry, Martin, I'm just taking control of the screen for a sec. Okay, so hopefully you can see some of those words coming through on there, some really strong words and exactly some of the words that we would expect to see. Helpful definitely being the big one in the middle. Hopefully we'll start to see some themes appear as well. It's always really interesting to see how closely they align with quality and customer experience. Empowering as well, another big one that's coming through on there. Reassuring and supportive. We've got a few more people added in. Okay, I think that's quite static now. So thank you everyone for contributing to that. And if you are still typing in the background, then please do finish that. I'll stop sharing now and we can go back to the slides. Great, thanks, Martin. Okay, so moving on into some of the detail and talk about and focus on what we mean by community-based debt advice, or CBDA. So CBDA is free, trusted, high-quality debt advice that's delivered within communities. The aim is to reduce people's money worries, help them build financial resilience, and give them confidence to take control of their situations. What makes this approach different from more traditional debt advice is that it's embedded within local support networks. So it draws on community knowledge, local presence and existing partnerships to reach people who might otherwise find it difficult to access advice. So the ambition is for the CBDA service to be visible, trusted and accessible in local communities, tailored and high quality so people get the best possible outcomes, and effective in helping people manage their debt in a sustainable way. And linked into the backbone of what community-based debt advice will be, we'll have a little look at the MAP standards on the next slide. Okay, so MAP standards, firstly, what are they? They are a set of requirements and core principles that guide the effective delivery of debt advice with a strong focus on quality and performance. They cover key areas such as quality and compliance, customer experience, training and capability, and governance. They're designed to make sure that there's consistency and fairness across the sector, and they set the minimum expectations for services delivering MAPS funded advice. And more importantly, they support a customer-centred approach with an emphasis on timeliness and achieving positive outcomes. So why do they matter? So they exist first and foremost to protect consumers by ensuring that the information, guidance and advice that they receive genuinely helps those most in need. They also support organisations by providing a framework for maintaining quality, continuously improving services and building trust and credibility across the sector. Finally, it's worth noting that the requirement to set, monitor and enforce these standards is part of MAPS's core legal mandate under the Financial Governance and Claims Act 2018. The first triennial review of these standards was completed in summer 2024, and as part of responding to the findings and recommendations, an updated version of the MAP standards was published in October 2025 following their approval by the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority. So next slide will just focus really high level on what the new MAP standards that have recently been approved by the FCA look like. They are now grouped into three key categories that hopefully reflect the full service journey. So standards 1 to 3 focus on designing services and creating capability. This is all about how organisations set themselves up for success, from building the right infrastructure and governance to developing the capability and skills needed to deliver high quality support. Then standards 4 to 6 move into delivering services. These cover what happens day to day when supporting customers, ensuring that advice is accurate, appropriate, and provides good outcomes. Finally, standards 7 to 10 focus on managing the service. Things like performance management, continuous improvement, and assurance activity to maintain quality and compliance over time. Together, these 10 standards provide a clear, structured framework for understanding and improving how services are designed, delivered, and managed across the sector. So, next slide is looking ahead at and really summarising perhaps what we expect from future supply partners delivering community-based debt advice. So, first is a commitment to quality. So partners will embed the MAP standards across everything that they do, making sure that advice is accurate, consistent, and focused on achieving the best outcomes. Second, a clear focus on customer experience. Services should be delivered with empathy, respect, and timeliness, and designed to be accessible and inclusive so they can meet the needs of diverse communities. Third, strong governance and compliance. Partners will have robust controls in place and will meet relevant regulatory obligations, including those set out by the FCA. Fourth is collaboration and continuous improvement. We want partners who actively share insight and best practice and who engage positively in quality reviews, responding constructively and using feedback to continuously improve services. And finally, positive impact. So services should be able to demonstrate measurable outcomes for clients and communities and use resources effectively and transparently to maximise reach and benefit. Overall, this reflects an approach where quality, accountability and continuous learning sit at the heart of service delivery. Okay, next slide, what we've heard. So during our regional events that we have held, we were able to gather lots of feedback and insights. Following on from the events, we asked you some key feedback areas through a survey, and we know that lots of you did respond to this. So thank you for all those that did. We really thought that it would be helpful for us to share with you some of the key insights from those surveys, because everything that's come through really does give us an opportunity to understand what support organisations need as we move forward. So on to the next slide. So firstly, there was a really call for a strong standardised quality assurance framework, particularly with some clear expectations around what good looks like, particularly in relation to quality and customer experience. So yeah, through most of the responses, we saw evidence of this. We also heard the importance of clear and timely communication, including early guidance on service expectations, contractual requirements, roles and responsibilities. Another consistent theme was the need for inclusive and flexible training support, particularly around working with vulnerable clients, digital delivery and FCA compliance. There was also a call for proportionality, recognising the needs of smaller organisations and whether scalable requirements, what that looks like, what risk-based sampling could be, and clearer benchmarks. We also heard a strong appetite to make better use of customer feedback and complaints, both to improve services and to build feedback loops into service design and continuous improvement. And finally, partners highlighted the need for practical operational tools, such as templates for onboarding and risk logs, and also access to a sandbox environment so data flows can be tested before go live. These insights have been hugely valuable and are helping to shape our approach going forward. We really want to build on these insights and some of the really rich, valuable information that you've told us so far. And we really want today, as I've suggested earlier on, to be really interactive. So with that in mind, I'll hand you over to my colleague, Catherine, who will take us into our first workshop.
Thanks, Kelly. Hi, everyone. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Catherine Thomas. I'm Senior Customer Experience and Quality Manager here at MAPS. And I'm going to take us through into kind of the first theme that we're wanting to explore with you. So really building on some of the insights that we've gained through the market engagement today, we're looking to take today's opportunity to feedback where we've got to so far in terms of thinking, and use this as an opportunity to get a little bit more into the detail, but also get some of your initial reactions, thoughts and feelings in response to some of that detail. So Martin, if you could pop me forward, thank you, and one more, thank you. So first of all, what we wanted to give is a bit of an overview, certainly especially for those that maybe haven't worked directly with MAPS before, and to start to outline what quality assurance at MAPS looks like currently, but also what it might be able to look like in the future, specific for this funding stream. So firstly, wanted to give a bit of an overview of what we expect of our grant holders and those that work directly with us. So while we do set some very high level parameters, broadly internal and first line quality assurance, so that which is happening at service level, not necessarily that carried out by MAPS independent quality assurance level, but that happening on the first line. Really, we are looking for our grant holders to develop an appropriate internal first line approach to design it and operationalize it that meets the needs of that particular service. So really, part of the reason we've set eligibility criteria around ensuring we're working with organisations who hold the relevant FCA authorisations and a MAPS accredited quality standard is to ensure that they have the capability and the experience of designing and delivering debt advice services, so that that can cascade right the way through to some of these enabling functions like quality assurance to support high quality delivery. So the frequency and intensity of activity that is included within first line quality assurance will be determined by the grant holder, but we are encouraging that that themes like proportionality and risk are considered as that's developed, and really looking at the uniqueness of a particular partnership when building that up. And one of the crucial things we'll be looking to grant holders for is to ensure that this is in place and overseen across the supply chain. So there will be kind of oversight responsibilities that sit alongside that. So the detail, things like frequency and intensity, are to be determined by the grant holder sitting within some of those themes. Similarly, the other area where we do provide some high-level parameters to sit within is around the quality resource. But really what we're looking for is ensuring that there is dedicated resource to ensuring the quality of delivery. Outside of that, we also currently set some parameters for the technical supervisor role. So those individuals that are responsible for overseeing and often assessing first line quality assurance methodologies. So we currently set some parameters around minimum experience levels and ensuring that there is an approach in place for their own activity to be checked. So there's an opportunity to check the checkers there as well to ensure high quality. So principally, we set that as an expectation to be built up with some requirements around minimum expectations for technical supervisors. But again, what that quality resource structure and shape looks like, things like ratios, are to be determined by the grant holder as part of that broader quality assurance approach that can be built up and designed for the service. So that's what we expect of our grant holders in respect of quality assurance. Could just move to the next slide. So what we wanted to give an outline of, certainly for those who maybe don't receive MAPS funding directly or kind of have visibility of what our activity looks like currently. Wanting to give a little bit of an overview of our core quality assurance methodologies that apply to our services. So the first is what we call the control self-assessment. So this is an online template where we ask for organisations that we work with to outline the controls environment that they've put in place to ensure compliance. So whether it be a preventative control to try to stop non-compliance, like training, a detective control like first line quality assurance and file checks to detect where things might be going wrong, or corrective controls like contingency plans. We are looking for a little bit more information about how that works in practice. How those controls are overseen and governed to ensure that they effectively deliver the outcome hoped, so compliance with the relevant standards. But also we ask for delivery partners to give us an assessment of their view of the robustness of that control, so a RAG status. So this really allows us to understand the controls environment that's been put in place in the background to ensure compliance. And crucially is a really important source of information for us should we need to reference back once we're kind of in the delivery phase, if anything doesn't seem to be working as it might be expected for ensuring compliance for that particular standards. So we expect that to be completed to cover all of the MAP standards that are relevant to the service, and also to understand where there are sub-grantees, how that is cascaded to ensure it's in place throughout the service. So that's a control self-assessment process. The second of our core quality assurance methodologies is the customer-facing assessment. So this is where we sample case records and assess the compliance of what we call the customer-facing standards, which are really the standards where we're able to see evidence of compliance within the case record interaction itself. So that might be the case record on a CRM or a transcript or a call recording that is reviewed by the Independent Quality Assessment Service, so our third-party supplier, and also we ask the lead grant holder to carry out that assessment alongside. And really what that enables to see is have we got a shared understanding by both MAPS and our third-party assessor and the delivery partners, but also start to see any risk areas where we might be seeing non-compliance play out in practice through the evidence of that customer interaction. So that's a customer-facing assessment approach. And then thirdly, we have a continuous improvement offering. So we currently offer to our delivery partners the opportunity to request support around continuous improvement where it links to compliance with the MAP standards. So for example, if a particular control doesn't seem to be working or there might be room for efficiencies, there is an opportunity to call on continuous improvement resource to support with any of those initiatives. So that's a quick overview of quality assurance at MAPS and the activities we undertake. Could just move to the next slide. Thank you. We really recognise a lot of our methodologies currently really do hinge on us being able to see some of those problems play out in a live environment and getting that coming through in case record and interaction evidence. So what we have started thinking about at MAPS is, are there other things we could do to support services to identify and address risk areas around non-compliance sooner, and start to have that broader vision of end-to-end customer journeys. So just moving into sort of the space of what could we do in the future. We have played around and tested with a couple of methodologies for discrete service lines that might be something that we want to consider a little bit more in the future. So, for example, customer journey mapping. It is something that we might be able to use in the future to complete desktop reviews, ask clarifications about how things work in practice, and start to be able to highlight quite early days, either in service design or mobilisation, where the risk areas might be for non-compliance, and seek to address that preemptively rather than waiting for us to find where things aren't working and customers might already be impacted. Similarly, we've done some adjustments to some of that methodology. There's an opportunity to use scenarios, so varying client circumstances or case complexity, for example, to actually stress test how that might work for certain clients with certain presenting issues. Additionally, we have also trialled completing that process through a site visit. So really building on the desktop review and the scenario-based review, but actually having the individuals responsible for delivering the service take us through that full journey to get a real understanding for how that might feel or function in practice. So just wanted to raise those as a couple of examples of some of the things that might be possible for us to consider and build into our approach, both in the way that we support and monitor and enforce compliance with the MAP standards going forward. Thank you. So what we're going to do now is the first of what will be 4 breakout sessions across the session. So this breakout session is really looking for consideration of some of the things we've just talked about, and to start to get your responses of, when thinking about some of those things that we've just outlined, what we expect from grant holders and what we might be able to do to support either things that we've been doing to date or things that we might be able to build in the future. What might feel right for this particular service? So really considering some of those points that Kelly's drawn out earlier in the scene setting, we recognise that a really important part of this service is about being in the community and responding to local needs. And with that, the kind of grant makeup will look a little bit different. So is there anything here to feedback around initial responses to the balance of the clarity of expectations and the flexibility to adjust? Is there anything more or differently we might be able to do to capture the full customer journey? Is there anything more that might enable proactive identification of areas of improvements above and beyond what I've just outlined there around some of the customer journey methodologies? Additionally, we're really keen to start to explore proportionality with you. Does that amount of MAPS oversight and monitoring feel right? Does that feel proportionate to the risk levels or the impact that non-compliance with the MAP standards or poor customer experience or quality might have? And is there any are you able to identify any opportunities for improvement? Is there anything here that might strengthen or streamline the processes we've just talked about? Is there anything that's currently that you're doing in your first line QA approach, which you actually think is working really well, that we might want to consider differently? Or is there anything for those of you that might not be MAPS funded or will receive funding from other funding bodies? Is there anything that's happening there that would be interested for us to be aware of and possibly draw from in terms of how we might approach this for this particular funding stream in the future? So before I send us out into the respective rooms, I'm just going to pause there for any questions. So if we're able to do the bit where we possibly unmute people, either use the chat function or raise your hand. Happy to take any initial questions before we move into the first breakout room, and I just do a bit of an overview of what that will look like. Okay, no questions jumping out. So we're going to go into our breakout rooms now. Should have between kind of 10 and 15 people, maybe a little bit less in each of the breakout rooms. You will also have a MAPS colleague in each of the breakout rooms just to support and facilitate, and also to take some notes in the background. You'll be able to come on camera and off mic. really use some of the prompts here to really draw out some of the insights that you might be able to share with us at this stage. I would say please be as open and as honest as possible. We're really looking for kind of transparency in insights so we can make sure we're taking that on board in terms of developing the next level of detail for our quality assurance approach. I'd encourage you to use the hand function if wanting to come on and speak, just to make that a little bit more manageable, but the chat function will also be open in those breakout sessions. You will get a 5-minute warning towards the end. And as I said, you'll have a MAPS facilitator in each room, and we will then come back and do a little bit of a feedback loop. So any questions before we move into rooms? Okay, great. So we're going to move into this breakout rooms and have about 20 minutes to start to talk through some of that. So your facilitators will have this slide, so don't worry if you've not got it. But can I ask we open the breakout rooms? So I hope that was useful. I hope timings were all right, and thank you for bearing with us with a little bit of teething issues with getting you all into the breakout rooms. Hopefully, as we go through the session, it will get a little bit smoother each time. So I'm just going to actually ask for the MAPS colleagues from each of the rooms really to summarise one of the key call outs. Sorry, bear with me. I'm just trying to check the chat to make sure. Okay, thanks, Joanne. That's really useful to understand that there's probably still quite a lot to be said, even with the kind of times in those breakout sessions. Definitely fair. Okay, so I'm gonna go through and just call out my MAPS colleague from each room. So we had 7 rooms. So one key call out, and if you can, so one key call out from your discussions, and if you can, if your point has already been said, kind of move on to the next one, so we have a first spread. But Andy, I'll come to you first.
Hello. Yeah, so we discussed quite a bit in the group. But the main kind of overarching theme that came out of it was around the flexibility that's been given to grant holders around equality. And I think the consensus was that they prefer a little bit more of a defined criteria of quality and a baseline, because it kind of leaves it, a lot of it is open to interpretation on what the grant holder feels is good quality and what's not. And then that can lead to a lot of inconsistencies across the board and different customer journeys. And that was kind of supported by everybody in the group, really. There was a lot of nuances around that. But that was the main kind of concern, was just making sure that, and I think there was a comment actually that the new MAP standards are a lot better than what they were, and that does define it a lot more, but especially around the customer facing aspect of it, just a little bit more clarity and definition of what's expected so that they know what they're comparing it to, rather than it being open to interpretation. I think that was the biggest kind of takeaway from the group.
Thanks, Andy. And I think I'm really pleased to hear some of the feedback is that we feel like we're moving in the right direction with the updated standards, and certainly that's what we're kind of looking to achieve, but also that balance between kind of flexibility and clarity, and making sure we're getting that right. Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Carol, over to you next.
Yeah, thank you. What came through strongly in our group is the value in having site visits, and in the presentation when you talked about the scenarios, that was seen as a positive, but the value in having site visits that are very much focused on what's happening at the front line, and that was supported by the fact that in the current system it's seen as a significant challenge that only the case record is reviewed in terms of quality, because there's a lot that's not seen through the case record, and also a strong perception that the case record has to be absolutely comprehensive detailing every single thing that's happened during the interaction to be sure that it's recognised that it did happen. So that was the main theme of our discussion.
Great. So being able to get a little bit more under the hood and get some insights beyond just what we're seeing in case records.
Yeah.
And maybe using kind of site visits as an enabler for that site visibility and awareness.
Yeah, and just as a very quick side, there was discussion about trying to use more technology for quality assuring so that we can see more than we're seeing now in the sample sizes that we're reviewing.
Great, thanks, Carol. Sarah, over to you next.
Yeah, obviously some of those points have already been raised, so and sort of same agreement. One of the things that's coming through that some people are already doing work on in working groups within their own organisations, and for instance, one example is looking at individual IFRs and working together on different specific areas and having themes and how the skills can be improved there to and I feel that's quite a good thing that's happening, and will help with improvements as well going forward. So sort of working groups and things internally that will help with that.
So using that to sort of facilitate and share knowledge.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the bits of feedback is that there is still quite a bit of emphasis on sort of what kind of isn't being done, but also looking at what the good stuff that's happening and sharing that more as good practice as well across organisations. So that feeling coming through as well. And on one of the other things is looking at how quality assessors can be trained at the same level as IQAS assessors as well. So that's just a couple of points there.
Yeah, I've seen that come through the chat as well. Thanks, Sarah. Fiona, over to your group next.
Yeah, thanks, Catherine. Again, some points that have already been raised. We're talking quite a lot about the diversity of community-based services, the fact that people are going to be in all sorts of different locations, and again, this sort of idea that wanting to make the service as flexible as possible and making sure that the quality process doesn't then feel for advisors like a kind of tick box exercise, but also recognizing that with community-based services can be really difficult to get a record that isn't just the case notes and some of those challenges of the things that really matter, kind of the tone, how client-centered, sometimes really don't come across. So people really open to sort of exploring some new things and trying to make sure that quality is framed wider than just that sort of box ticking exercise, so people have the confidence to deliver really great services.
Thanks, Fee. And yeah, I think that is a theme coming out quite strongly, is really can we broaden the basis of which we review quality to make for more meaningful conversations, recognising some of the limitations that there are in some of the current methodologies and case records. Thanks, Fiona. Matthew, over to your group next.
Pretty much the same things that have come back from the other rooms. The big thing that came back from us was there's a lot of love for MAP standards. People can understand it, they appreciate where it's coming from, they can see why needs to be done. The concern was how it's then being applied at the consistency and the case checking level. And we had two different delivery partners in the conversation with very different ways of doing it. And one felt more stable than the other, but there was a lot of concern about the remoteness of the person doing the assessment of the actual case record compared to the advisor on the front line who's dealing with the client, and then trying to make sure that those two married up to actually show what met all the MAP standards and what was actually just something that was missing from the case record but didn't actually impact for the overall quality of that actual client appointment. So there was a little bit of concern about the remoteness and how it's applied from the lead org level down.
Yeah, that's really interesting to understand, because there's lots of different models that can kind of come in that first line approach and how that cascades right the way up to when MAP source for independent assessment. So some really useful food for thought there around making sure that connection isn't getting lost. Thanks, Matthew. Lucy, over to your room next.
Hiya. A lot of what's already been said has been discussed in our room as well, but Regarding supported learning as well, our group was talking about looking at a shift with quality towards building advisor confidence rather than just compliance. And then there was also a point raised about getting supervisors, technical supervisors from other organisations together again, and talking through some of the common areas, any areas of improvement, and just sharing good practice. They found that was really helpful, and they used to happen as well.
Thanks, Lucy. Yeah, I think that compliance versus confidence combination is really, really interesting, and making sure that in how we set some of those minimum expectations around the standards, we can be clear on compliance, but recognise that good practice may well go well beyond that, depending on the advisor's kind of skills and confidence. Great. And last but not least, Tamsin, over to you. I know we've gone through lots of different points, so
it's okay actually. I still have a couple. So I think the
Lovely.
First one is to say that the proportionality was really welcomed by everybody, but there was sort of a flag to say in order to get to that place where organisations could be proportional, that they would really value some support and some oversight and some examples about that, and then that bringing together. There was definitely quite a conversation too about how long the funding is, and therefore taking a sort of risk-based approach to quality was really welcomed, but there was a recognition that things will change, whether that's about technology or about complexity of issues or a pandemic and things like that, and actually how to pivot and have that within that flexibility was something which people wanted assurance that those approaches could be properly tested in order to enable that. So that I think was a really interesting point. And then the final one was really about how to link specifics about remedies to training, so that they could really be about addressing those skill gaps, and for that to be kind of more about how quality and training are linked closer together to develop the careers of people rather than it just being about compliance.
Thanks, Tam. I'm very impressed. You managed to pull out some real interesting points in addition to all of those that have already been talked about. And I think this sort of idea of balancing and making sure we're kind of walking quite a tight rope in terms of balancing flexibility with agility, with giving structure and clarity, but in a way that sets minimum expectations, but maybe how you meet that minimum expectation can be fluid, dependent on all of those different things that might be influencing it. Great, thank you. Okay, I'm going to move us on. So we're going to move quite swiftly into a second breakout session, but this now is really kind of pivoting thought and focusing on when we're thinking about setting the service up for success, what are the sorts of things we might be needing to think about or do. So I mentioned a little bit earlier a couple of different methodologies that we've started to consider and develop and test that really focuses on customer journeys more broadly and allows us to look at things prior to waiting for evidence of compliance coming through a case record, for example. But we're really just wanting to build on that and start to get some more ideas from yourselves around what actually might be the best guidance or support we could give you in the early stages of service design and mobilisation, to really help set the service up for success. So a couple of themes coming through there. It might be that we could actually use some of those methodologies to really review and support during the detailed service design processes. Looking at those site visits, get a better understanding of how delivery might work in practice and start to support identification of opportunities, whether it be improvements to mitigate non-compliance or some of the technological advances that we're starting to see and sharing good practice. What sort of things might we want to be doing early stages of the service to really best support. That might be carrying out testing activity. So we could look to kind of do some activity that gives you an early glance of how you're performing now prior to go launch of this particular funding stream, but also look at how we might share insights and learning to sort of draw on some of those assessment findings and other examples of what might work well. So building on what we've just talked about, if we're now really thinking about setting the service up for success, what might that look like? So just go on to the next slide. Great. So the second breakout session is exactly that, really focused on what do you need from us early. So what are the things you're going to want up front or really early doors? One of that might be dependent on kind of your current readiness and confidence feeling. So some positive feedback there around the MAP standards. How confident are people currently feeling that actually current practices might look like they align already to be compliant, and certainly would be in a position to do that from day one? Are there any particular areas that you feel would benefit from further clarity or guidance from us? And at that early stage, what type of support would really help and make that quality assurance approach easier to understand and deliver? And then thinking about collaboration and ongoing support. So some of that might be able to happen really upstream in early stages. But what sort of touch points or feedback loops would be useful from either ourselves or possibly facilitating some sort of support networks as we move through these processes? So I'm going to pause there for any questions, and then look to move us into breakout rooms. Okay. Hoping that's clear. Again, your facilitators should have a bit of a screenshot for you to work from in the session, so don't worry about memorising all of this up front. As before, feel free to come on camera, come off mute, and hopefully have some really good discussions back out in your breakout sessions. I think we've got 15 minutes for this one, Kelly?
Yeah, that's correct.
Perfect. So 15 minutes for this one. So I think you'll be... Oh, let me just check the chat. Okay, no worries. If you have to dip out. Okay. So head out onto your breakout sessions. Thanks, guys. Okay, well, much the same as last time. Thanks, Martin. So just really going back to kind of some of the focus on this session, which is looking about what support you might need from us early in service design. So, bear with me. I am going to go back out to MAPS facilitators in the rooms for a little bit of feedback, and then you'll be pleased to hear we'll pause for a bit of a break after this one. So gonna go over to you, Fiona. How did your room get on with this one?
Do you know, Catherine, Nick and I were just discussing if Nick was going to do it, but since you've mentioned my name, I'll
Oh,
no, it's okay. It's all right. No, it's all good, Catherine. So we had a bit of a chat. I think it's one of those areas where people who are more familiar with the MAP standards at the moment are feeling a bit more confident in stuff, and a recognition that actually for a lot of areas, potentially it's going to be new people coming in who might not be as familiar. And so it's that sort of known unknown. It's really difficult sort of sense, but people really felt like you know, a place to be able to sort of clarify stuff and check understanding. We wondered if maybe actually there might be a role for MAPS in that sort of mobilization period, not just to be working with leads, but potentially to be helping facilitate stuff between leads and their supply chain, just to make sure that sort of everything was, you know, consistently interpreted, and that there was opportunities throughout. So yeah, and also sort of some of the good stuff that is out there at the moment, like the assessor toolkit and the clarification hubs, kind of continuing and making sure that people have access to those who are newer to the process.
Great. So really recognising that extra engagement to people new to the process, but also considering how that might go beyond just a sort of MAPS and grant holder relationship where that's facilitating that shared understanding. Great. Thanks, Fiona. Tamsin, over to you next.
Go last. Exciting. I don't get to go last.
I know, that's why I bumped you up the list.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so I think one of the key things that came out actually was about how maybe for some advisors, some of this will might sound new, because they haven't necessarily been exposed to the MAP standards, and therefore some kind of intense communications and examples that can help people recognize that although they might not have heard of this before, it's actually what they're doing, and it should be comfortable and familiar. And we in our room we had people who were doing frontline work and said that sometimes this MAP standards get sent out and they can be just quite a long list, and there's quite a bit of management speak, and it can feel hard to sort of recognize that they're translatable. So I think there is something around making it digestible, putting it in real world examples, and really trying to say what the standards are getting at. So why, then to motivate people to kind of connect and understand that, and that when any site visit is happening, that there's an opportunity that MAPS can explain about the context and why we're trying to achieve some of those things, so that that dialogue enables people to see it as more than compliance.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting one, that rationale behind why we set the minimum threshold there and why it's important for the customer and what they're trying to get out of it. Great. And also I think the examples point around really translating that into practice and real world, so it kind of feels more relatable, is a really, really interesting one. Thanks, Tamsin. Lucy, over to you next.
Yeah. Mainly confident that they might be able to meet the MAP standards in principle, and they do see it obviously as an opportunity to work on what they've already been doing with the right support and tools. There was a discussion around more clarity regarding what's considered good and measured against different delivery models. So as opposed to digital and web chat, as opposed to full casework. So there was a discussion around, again, like more examples, but even some shorter focus sessions to show real examples to feedback to advisors, whether that be delivery partners, showcasing a good case or something like that, but just focus sessions, or it could be on specific standards or scenarios, things like that. But it was, I think, the people in the group were confident with the standards. It's just more regarding the examples and what good looks like.
Yeah, great. And I think that how it might look and feel slightly different in the different delivery models is an important one, especially considering the flexibility really we are going to be instilling in grant holders to shape that service for their local communities. Thanks, Lucy. Matthew, over to you next.
Nicely in the middle to echo some of the points and hopefully add something new. Broadly the same confidence of the MAP standards understanding and how to apply those. No issues with, everyone was very happy with those. The big point that came out of ours was open channels for sharing best practice, getting people together, talking about what the results coming back, and for understanding where things are being picked up by quality checking within their organisation, which they don't necessarily agree with, and feeling that they kind of reach a brick wall with how far they can push a challenge on that.
Okay.
And then leading on from that, we also had mention about calibration meetings, which I know we've done in the past. There was a lot of love for how useful the calibration sessions were for getting understanding at the lead org level about where the MAP standards sit and where they should be interpreted. And there was definitely a clear appetite for keeping that level of openness. There was mention of not going back to DAPA.
Yeah, really useful feedback there, Matthew. And I think the calibration sessions is an interesting one, because we've certainly been reflecting internally about some of the openness discussions you're able to have to get that shared understanding in that sort of forum is really beneficial. So some internal reflections echoing some of that as well recently. So that's good. Andy, over to you next.
Just on the back of what Matthew said, I was under strict instructions not to even mention the word DAPA in my feedback. I just have. I've failed already. But broadly speaking, lots of confidence that organisations can meet the MAP standards from day one. We had organisations on the breakout room who were already under the standards, so I've got confidence they can meet that. Although it was noted that sometimes the difference in delivery partners can mean the service can be very different for customers and their experience, so can be a bit of a postcode lottery. But with regards to support from MAPS, some talk around support and guidance around technology and AI and how that can be implemented into service design. And then a big theme was around little bit of a kind of hangover from the first breakout room was around just having that support and guidance on not only how to meet the standards, but how to marry kind of quality with service design, and having that support into how to marry the two together was a kind of big theme. And just on the back of that is just making sure that we've got some definitive timelines on when the support's going to be available, so that organizations can kind of plan that in advance.
Thanks. And it's really interesting, that sort of marrying of service design with quality, because it is something we recognise there's an opportunity here to set the service up for success, but actually that's quite different from how we've maybe approached quality assurance with partners previously. So and here that kind of point around timelines and making sure that people have the opportunity to meaningfully engage when those opportunities do come up. Okay, thanks, Andy. Carol, over to you next.
Hi, yep. So very, very similar themes coming out of the group I was in. My group were all existing deliverers, so there wasn't anyone that was going to face the challenge of having to embed these for the first time. So the confidence levels are quite high, but in terms of support, things were mentioned like the toolkits and the clarification hub, how useful they've been implementing the current standards. So moving forward, having very detailed guidance for the new standards. What did come out is that even though those tools have been very helpful, that there is still some real inconsistencies with the whole human element. And I think the challenge that generally people want to overcome at the start of embedding the standards is to have very, very clear guidelines that mean that even as you go down the chain, so it's not just about MAPS having very clear guidelines, it's about the lead organisations being able to effectively roll those out and then get that real consistency across the different supervisors. And there were some examples of where even at their local operational levels, they've got different supervisors with a different take on what the expectation is, which obviously is very confusing for frontline workers. So a heavy emphasis on strong guidance, as much as we can give in terms of minimum expectations and thresholds, is really what's wanted. And there was one other point that came in right at the end that's completely separate, was to help with mobilisation, any data that we can provide and gap analysis to support mobilisation locally would be really helpful.
Thank you, Carol. Really interesting about what we might be able to do to share data. But I think that point around cascade as well, and ensuring that some of that messaging really cascades and that clarity floats all the way down to gain that shared understanding across the entirety of the service. And it's really important knowing that this is a funding stream that will be delivered through that sort of sub-grant model as well.
Yeah.
And last but not least, Sarah, over to you.
Yeah, so just really echoing a lot of what other people have said, certainly about having a central place where information can be shared, and also maybe FAQs. We put that in place quite early on to support people, particularly those who've not gone through this process before as well, to raise visibility and share good practice. Someone in my group who's looking at being a sub-grant holder, looking at where to go, being more collaborative, even though this is a competitive process, but sharing, what tools are being used, what CRMs are being used, that type of thing would be really good. And if MAPS could kind of facilitate that as well. And then just finally, asking for some guidance on all our standards. Obviously we had guidance before on the customer facing, but wanting some more steer on with the new standards, what that looks like, so you can have some more steer from MAPS. And just one final thing was on looking at having a little bit more steer from MAPS on what roles fit different standards. So I think probably need to explore that a little bit, Tony, what that looks like. But yeah, so a couple of different ones there from my group.
Thanks, Sarah. And I think that roles around different standards is really key, because we've got that split now in the MAP standards that more clearly focus on service design and capability delivery, and then that sort of organisational management. So I think that really makes sense. And to reassure everyone on the call, it is absolutely our intention, hopefully relatively soon, to be getting updated toolkits reflective of the newest version of the standards up for sharing, and we are looking to kind of broaden that to really clearly provide the minimum threshold of compliance for all of the standards. So watch this space on that front. So we have, conscious of the length of today's session, we have got a break slot now. So very shortly I'll let you go off and take 10 minutes. What I will say is we've still got some really interesting bits on the agenda for after the break. So I'll be talking a little bit more about training specifically, and really responding to some of the feedback we had in the survey and socialising what plans for that are looking like. And then also my colleague Avon will be talking in a bit more detail about customer experience and how we can make sure we're really making the most of feedback opportunities from clients themselves to kind of inform the service. So I think we'll take 10 minutes now, but ask that people rejoin at 20 past, so maybe actually giving you 11 minutes depending on how quickly I finish this sentence. So if everyone can come back at 20 past, and we'll see you shortly. Welcome back, guys. Hope everyone's managed to have a bit of a comfort break and grab a coffee. We will kick off with the second half of the session. So hopefully everyone's slowly rejoining or coming back to their desks, but numbers are looking okay. So I will move us on. Last one from me, and then I'll hand over to colleagues. But the sort of second workshop area we were wanting to talk about is training need. So for those of you that might have fed into survey responses, this was an area we've done quite a lot of probing around in terms of the market engagement approach, because there's a couple of different avenues that are available to us to support in terms of training needs. So if you could just take me on to the next slide. Thanks, Martin. So firstly, I just wanted to reiterate again, for those who might be less familiar with MAPS funding and how this has worked previously, but also to reiterate to those that might attend MAPS accredited training but not necessarily have a full idea of what happens in the background that supports that process. So one of the themes that came through really strongly in survey responses is what grant holders or sub-grant holders would be looking for to MAPS is to ensure that there is training is of sufficiently high quality to enable high quality delivery, and there's quality consistency as well. So MAPS will continue to maintain the individual framework of the MAPS Debt Advice Quality Framework. So for those of you who might not be aware, the MAPS Debt Advice Quality Framework splits into two sections. It has an individual framework and an organisational framework. The individual framework, that splits out different activity sets, so right the way across the debt advice journey. So from initial contact, so individuals that might be greeting clients as they join the service, to support work who might be doing a bit of triaging or form filling the support right the way through to supervision. So the individual framework splits out those competency sets and also maps out the minimum requirements for upfront technical training for each of those individual roles to undertake those relevant activity sets. So that is what we accredit training provision to. And we have our Learning Pathway Hub, which is what can be used to search for different training that's accredited to that individual framework and might meet the needs depending on the competency level that you might be looking to train individuals to. So that's what we do currently, and we intend to maintain that throughout the life of this funding stream, so that there will always be that role that MAPS will facilitate identification of high quality training in relation to the competency sets that might be relevant to delivery. Then what I wanted to outline is where some of that responsibility still sits with the grant holder to ensure that more holistic training approach for the service. So what the framework and our accreditation process will enable is identification of that minimum expectation upfront training that looks specifically around technical. They might include some softer skills within the framework. However, debt advice is complex, client needs are complex, and also technical training might only take individuals so far. So what we'd be looking to grant holders to lead on would be the development of that holistic training approach for the service as a whole to ensure high quality, which might build on some of those minimum expectations set out in the framework. And this really aligns with the MAP standards expectation. So again, that really reflects the need for that programme to be in place, both for initial and ongoing CPD for practitioners to ensure a high quality service. So as I've mentioned, the debt advice quality framework is a minimum expectations. It's by no means exhaustive, and it should be supported by that broader programme to be developed by the grant holder for the service as a whole. It is also worth mentioning, please have a look if you haven't already, in terms of the definitions that sits around some of this in the MAP standards. So, for example, we define continued professional development quite broadly in this context. So again, there's not a specific scheme that we would be expecting grant holders or supply chains to subscribe to. It would be for that grant holder to reflect and set a programme up that would be appropriate for an individual service line. Take me through to the next slide. So that's what we do now to support both the quality and the consistency of training. What we've also been able to take away is we have socialised a couple of different options in relation to practically how training might be provided. And based on feedback to date and some of what we already have in place to address some of the focuses around quality and consistency, our intended training approach is that it will be for the grant holder and lead to decide what works best for their individual partnership, and they will have the option to buy from, as I've put some screenshots there for you from the Learning Pathway Hub. There's a number of existing training providers that are accredited to the MAPS quality framework. So grant holders will have the option to buy or design and deliver those training needs themselves. So another thing that came through quite strongly in the market engagement previously is actually there is in-house capability for training, and in some areas in-house training already accredited against the MAPS quality assurance debt advice quality framework. So really our intended training approach aligns with this ownership to sit with grant holders and the ability to give them flexibility. So we will continue to accredit training and support the grant holders to identify training suppliers and options which might be set around designing or delivering that themselves and gaining accreditation. But what this will really allow is that flexibility that came through really strongly. So that need for grant holders to be able to address individual and local training needs and balance that with local needs and themes coming through strongly. So that also aligns quite well with the grant management approach we're expecting to take, and MAP standards expectation of that responsibility sitting with the grant holder. And as I said, aligns with feedback to date, really with the view of the MAP's role looking to help support ensuring quality and consistency, but actually availability and being able to combine some of that technical training with practical experience and onboarding that might sit more locally was a really strong preference that came through. So our intended training approach is to give that option to either buy or design or deliver directly to grant holders to have that choice. Take me through to the next slide, please. Thanks, Martin. So on to breakout session 3. Really, with what you've heard just now, we're really looking to understand how do you think this approach will work in practice? Again, exploring themes of confidence and readiness. Do you already have partnerships with training providers? Do you already have some in-house training capability that you might draw upon or look to build on? Do you envisage there to be any unintended consequences or blockers to what I've just outlined that we need to be aware of now so we can factor in either to understanding further support needs or looking to kind of break down some of those blockers. Additionally, so we use the Debt Quality website, we've got the Learning Hub. Do those resources feel readily available? Were you aware of them already? If not, we're really keen to hear about that, because it may be something that we want to work on in terms of raising the visibility of some of the resources that are already available. And if you were aware of them, are they sufficient to meet your needs? Is there anything more you might want or need from MAPS to support making this proposed approach work in practice? And then again, continuing to explore that theme around collaboration. Is there anything that MAPS might facilitate to support sharing of learning or good practice in relation to kind of training more broadly for these services going forward? So I'll pause there for questions, and then we'll move back out into breakout rooms. Any questions on this one? Okay, I can't see any hands or anything dropping into the chat. So I think we've got 15 minutes for this one, Kelly. Sorry,
Yeah,
I forgot.
15 minutes.
Yeah, 15 minutes for this one. So you'll drop back out into your breakout rooms. So really have a think. How does that feel? How does that sit? And is there anything more or different you might need from us to facilitate? Thank you. Okay, well, used to this sort of round by now, really keen to hear a little bit more about how discussions went in all of your respective rooms. So Lucy, I'll come to you first for your one key call out from discussions.
Okay, people generally happy, obviously happy with the proposal there. One of the things that was mentioned was there's not necessarily enough training courses availability, so they might find that there's the training courses that they might need to go on are always fully booked as opposed to others. But what was mentioned just right at the end, which I think I'll call out, is more practical training, more like role play rather than more sitting in a room or on Zoom with academic, but putting it into practice more. I think that was a really good call out. There was a lot of points raised though, so hopefully Martin caught all that feedback to you.
Great, thanks Lucy. Matthew, I'll come to you next.
I'm going to echo Lucy. Lots and lots of point raised. It's definitely the most involved discussion we've had so far today. The key takeaway from it was a real desire to have something more than just book-based learning of just doing the training session and then it's done. A lot of being a debt advisor is learned on the job around the training sessions. And again, towards the end, similar to Lucy, we had talk about, could there be something like an apprenticeship which ties those two things together of the book-based learning and on the job learning, but reaches the same stage at the end of being an accredited debt advisor, instead of doing all the book-based learning, then doing the on-the-job learning, and it being a couple of years before they reach the level where they'd be confident of being an experienced debt advisor.
Yeah, really interesting. And that practical experience and how important it is was something that's come through really, really strongly in the feedback today. Thanks, Matthew. Fiona, over to you next.
Yeah, thanks, Catherine. So I think we had a good chat and lots of people seeing this as a really good opportunity for new leads to particularly sort of get a bit more involved in training and how that is working across a partnership, and particularly in that sort of non-technical side, in those sort of softer skills. And we also spoke a bit about potentially there being a bit of a gap in the market for CPD for advisors who are more experienced, that often to get the sort of CPD points, it felt like they were maybe having to do stuff that was familiar or stuff they already knew. So keen to see what we might be able to do to support in that area.
Thank you. So a little bit of emphasis there on CPD. Okay. Tamsin, over to you next.
Thanks, Catherine. Yeah, a couple of points. So one was really about how in a partnership, there's experience of being able to use that buying power to get in training that was really bespoke to their needs, which then got over some of the things that was being reflected about how maybe some of the resources, there could be some barriers there and it could be a bit confusing. There was definitely appetite for developing bite size, that it was quite hard operationally to always find half a day or a full day for training, and that maybe bite size would enable that. And then just a final point was, it would be really valuable if there could be a training course in the MAP standards that could be mandatory, that then could help people to understand like how it relates to frontline delivery and how to meet against those standards, which I thought was a good suggestion.
Yeah, really interesting one, and really building on that, some of the feedback we had earlier about ensuring the cascade and how we can make that sort of tangible and translate it into real life. So yeah, definitely some interesting food for thought there. Carol, over to you next.
The focus of our discussion was really around upskilling trainees. That seemed to be the key emphasis. It was quite fortunate that I had in my group a provider that has a very positive experience, a provider that's having some challenges, and a training provider. So we were able to have a really fruitful discussion there. And I think what it comes down to is communication, and the fact that there are different established relationships between providers, and you don't know what you don't know. So if you don't know how to establish what another provider has established and is doing really well, because you're not aware of it, you're isolated, it's very difficult. And that if there was some sort of forum where people could get together periodically, a facilitated forum where these things can be tabled, with maybe training providers present, then these things could be resolved quite quickly. We've just in that room resolved an issue, so it just sitting around a table can make the difference. So that was the key message, really. One of the things that was mentioned was something, and this is new to me, and Alice has put it in the chat, the MAPS Training Academy in mid-2022. That seemed to work really well. And since the provider that's having challenges at the moment had very positive experiences with that, and so would welcome something similar to that if that were a possibility.
Thank you, Carol. Good to hear that. I think that's probably in relation to some of the COVID response, rapid increase of capacity there, that might be referenced. So glad to hear that.
It was beyond. Apparently, it was beyond increasing capacity. That's why I was a bit. I did say it was at the increasing capacity, but it was apparently after that. So I don't know. Anyway.
Useful to hear different those different models, and also that that point kind of before around there's varying experience levels and relationships already built, and is there a role for MAPS to play to kind of facilitate that forum? I think that's a really interesting one, and one we can definitely think about a little bit more. Sarah, coming to you next.
Yeah, just I think one of the key points is just an acknowledgement from MAPS about funding for smaller organisations for training, and that is a challenge. So that was discussion that came up, but also about basically also about having training for quality assessors and aligning that. So basically on Tamsin's role, Tamsin's comments she made about having training for quality assessors at IQAS and across the sector, so we're all aligned. So assessment looks as well. So different perspective on training there, but funding and accessibility of some of the training are two key things that are coming through. Trying to make sure that you can get your advisors on that training is proving a bit of a challenge, and having availability of courses.
Great, thanks, Sarah. And last but not least, over to you, Andy, for your room's reflections.
Yeah, thanks. Lots of really good points raised in our room, but I'll stick to the one key point, and probably that was around in-house training. There was support for flexibility to be able to do that. One of the organisations has recently switched to that, and there was some teething problems in that process. So there was a call for MAPS to be heavily involved in that process from a guidance and support perspective. Things around concerns around the quality assurance of in-house training and does it meet the need? So there was a big push for that's a good and it's a positive way of doing it, but MAPS need to be involved and make sure it's done correctly.
Great, thank you. And I think probably with some of that feedback, there might also be some considerations for us to take away in our accreditation approach as well, and that framework, and if there are any kind of gaps that might be able to be filled with some of that feedback. Thanks, Andy. Well, you'll be delighted to hear that is going to be the last from me on kind of the more quality assurance focused themes that we were exploring today. And I now hand over to Avon to talk about all things customer experience.
Thank you, Catherine, and hello, everybody. I am conscious this is a long webinar. I'm really pleased that you're still here, and it's great to hear that the momentum of conversation is still happening. So thank you. It's been really useful for me to listen, because even throughout the feedback on these particular topics we were talking about earlier in the workshop, there has been a common theme on customer experience coming through. So it's really, really great to hear. What I'm going to do is just give you a little bit of context on what we're doing around customer experience and what it means. And to wake us up a little bit, there is a Slido coming. So please do have your phones ready or your website up so that we can get this going. And without further discussion, I'm going to ask Martin to move us onto the next slide, please. So customer experience, as we've defined it within MAPS. So I'm a senior customer experience manager here at MAPS. I work within the CX and Q team. It's around every interaction. It's about clients who feel and what they remember in every single moment that they're with us. So we know the complexities of debt advice and some of the nuances, and particularly the difficulties that those clients that come to the services that you guys provide can experience. So what I want to do in this one is shift it a little bit away from the standards and approaches that we've been through and broaden it up, because we've set CX as a foundation within the MAP standards. The new MAP standards, you will see we've incorporated things around accessibility, effective communication, being clear and concise and structured, user needs testing right up front. But we all know from discussions in this forum alone that CX is more than that. So although the MAP standards set the foundation for CX, they set out some minimum expectations, CX is broader than one interaction, and it is also broader than customer satisfaction, net promoter scores, and some of the things that we've already spoken about today that I'm sure have come up in your discussions, softer skills, empathy, trust. And these are all things that came out right at the beginning when you were asked to do the first Slido. Caring, supporting, meaningful, time-bound were all words that you guys use to describe what you want your services to be known for. So what I would like to do just before we go any further is to open up the Slido, and what I would like everyone to put in is, which measures do you believe have the greatest impact on improving customer experience? So is it CSAT that will help us measure that? Is it doing trust scores? Is it understanding? What are the measures that you guys think improve customer experience? And I'm just going to leave it there for a minute. Joining instructions are there. Code is there if you want to use it, or alternatively, you can scan it. I'll just have a little bit of awkward silence while you do that, and then hopefully Kelly's going to bring up the word once we start getting people accessing it.
I will share, and then the code can stay on the screen then as well.
Ah, beautiful, thank you. Some brilliant ones coming in. Complaints and feedback, yeah, absolutely. Personalization, understanding, another key one. Practitioners is an interesting one as well. Yeah, we'll come to that one. Fabulous. Outcomes, transparency. Some really wonderful stuff coming through here. Absolutely. Empathy. You can see it's grown much bigger. So we like to see. I'll just give it an extra minute, conscious of time. equity, so accessibility, yeah. Training, honesty, really great stuff. And also all of these things help make up, and we've again touched on this earlier about when you guys were asked to describe what your service means, all of these things make up that. So really great and really great engagement. Thank you, everybody. So what I'm going to ask is that we move on to the next slide, please, Martin. Because what I want to do is just give those that have worked with us before and worked with our team before will have a better understanding of this. But for those who don't, I just want to give a little bit of an overview of customer experience. And at the moment, MAPS as an organisation is going through a maturity piece, and CX within MAPS is focused on customer satisfaction and interaction surveying right now. So I just want to give you a little bit of a flavour of what's happening. So at the moment, we have CSAT surveying done by a third party. We've got some longer lead times on field work, and results output means that we are potentially missing some early opportunities. We've got complex delivery models and approaches, as you well know, you deliver them, but there is inconsistencies in approaches to feedback collection and measurement, mixed sampling methodologies. Some are more passive, some are more proactive, but it also means that there could be some crossover with how we ask customers for feedback. And one of the things that's come up in the word is burden. So we need to make sure that we're asking for feedback at the right times, and we're doing so as a collective, so we're not overburdening customers. And then the last point on here is around transactional view of CX, and what that means is that we focus a lot on CSAT being the metric and the only metric, whereas actually we're looking to broaden that, and we'll see what the future looks like in a second. A lot of these things came through in the survey that we did before. So some of the things that came through there were around sampling and representative sampling, difference in expectation and needs between some of those that are more familiar with our CSAT and our customer experience monitoring, those that haven't perhaps engaged with us before and how we do things. So there's a different level there. And again, linked to this theme, there are different mechanisms being used. So I think Trustpilot came up in that view that we just saw on the Slido. Some people have more established CX platforms. Other people are, putting up web pop-ups if they need to, but there's not much consistency across, and it truly depends on the maturity complexity. So what we want to do is focus on customer experience in this session and what that might look like for the future, especially in the context of getting meaningful feedback and consistently in the context of the flexibility that this particular programme and commission of activities looks like. So for us at MAPS, better utilisation of delivery partner CX insights. For those that are more mature, you gather all of this information. How can we better use it together and collaboratively to build this holistic view of customer experience? Identifying some core metrics for CX, those that are not just strategic indicators on CSAT, but trust, effort scores, again, things that came up earlier in the Slido. So it's really great to see. And a common theme that's come up today around best practice sharing. How can we get the insights on what good looks like and what activity and mechanism we're using and share it across the landscape so that others can engage and improve off of the back of other people. So that's fantastic. Centralized CX management. So we've got a CX element now in our customer experience and quality team, and to support that, a CX platform is being procured as well. Reduced manual processes for feedback. So again, the feedback that came through from the survey that we did previously that led us to this point is sometimes it can take a lot of effort to get sampling over. There's some duplication in processes on checking and insights and data integrity. So there's an opportunity to improve that as well. And then another thing that's come through today that we want to try and address is improved availability of CX insights. So giving direct access to dashboards and making sure that regular reporting is there so that we can have those discussions as early as possible based on the feedback that we collect. I'm hoping that is quite a whistle-stop tour of where we are, where we want to be, and just a continuation of the engagement that you've done today would be fabulous as we go into the next breakout. Martin, if you can just move on to the next slide. So the The exam question is, how do we best support you embed, measure and act on CX insights? Now, conscious of the different maturity levels, particularly in grants, so lead grants and sub-grants, etc. So there is a lot to cover in this breakout session, but I'm really interested to see on the next level on how that would work for you guys. Do we need some more practical elements, materials? Do we need some more collaborative, design-based focus as we look to commission these? What metrics do you currently use that we could use? And how, again, if it's established, how do we build this better view? If you're not so established, what do you guys need to help support that we can do with what we've got here and how we support you as MAPS? There will be a breakout session. It is 4:05 for 15 minutes. We're trying to gain back a bit of time. Unless anybody has got any questions at all, we will head straight out into the breakout room. No? Wonderful. Okay, let's do 15 minutes now and we'll see you on the other side. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Oh, Jenny had your hand up already.
You know, every time I go back into this call to press resume, it puts my hand up.
Yeah, there's been a few bugs with Teams. There's a lot of us, so is that everyone back? I'm going to assume so. Thank you, everyone. I've only got a couple of minutes before I want to hand back over to Kelly to wrap up. So I'm just going to have time for a few. Can I just call on Matthew, please, if you wouldn't mind giving your one key call out to the room, please.
Yeah, we just get into the end of it when we ran out of time, so could do with a little bit more fleshing out. But a MAPS-led initiative to facilitate focus groups.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Actually getting clients together, potentially with some small incentives for the client's time of measuring that against different outcomes. So say clients who've gone through a DRO or clients who've had a benefit gain, of getting a group of similar outcomes together to do a real deep dive on their experiences, what worked, what didn't work, and then being able to feed some of that data back into the respective partnerships and lead orgs, so they can also get an oversight of how that customer experience was measured at the end of it, because it did seem it's a little bit more fractured on the ground between those with large organizations who can do some and those with smaller organizations who are basically trying to use volunteers to call people up and hope they can get enough people together.
So like a centralized portal panel that allows us to get the consistency to feed out from one panel based on the outcomes rather than individual. Brilliant. Okay, thank you. Fiona, do you have one?
Yeah, I'm going to give you two really quickly, Avon. So some discussion about, you know, real challenges about what the right time is, but people being really receptive to something that was really simple, that worked for clients who you know, who might struggle with long surveys. So something like that would feel great, but also recognizing that actually advisors do get a lot of feedback, replies to texts, replies to emails. I'm really keen to encourage that and make sure that that has a way of feeding into the kind of customer experience view as well.
Brilliant. And yeah, the CX is obviously got customer in the word, but there is around, you know, advisors and practitioners and how their feedback counts as part of this as well. And just before we wrap up, Tamsin, you've got one.
Yeah, I do. Sorry, just coming off mute. So we had some fascinating conversation, but one of the key thing that we were discussing was actually around dropout. When do people, if they drop out, and why? And that isn't something that's routinely known or understood, but it was commented by a lot of people that actually that would be transformational in terms of addressing service development or being aware more about client vulnerabilities or circumstances to think about adapting our services to be able to make sure we're thinking about the experience that they're having. And yeah, Step Change has some examples about how they're doing some of that stuff to understand dropout. It seemed a really interesting factor.
Brilliant. No, thank you. Really insightful metric there that could add a lot of value. So thank you very much. I can see your hand up, Carol. Is that because you have one? If you
just
do,
very
we've got a
quick,
minute.
just a very quick one.
Yeah.
It was just something that cropped up in our conversations about not on the MAPS funded project, but on a different debt project. There are a couple of tools that are used to reflect distance travelled. So how was somebody when they started on the journey, and how did they feel at the end of the journey, and was there an improvement in probably a series of measures, I would imagine, around that. But I thought that was quite interesting.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. And just to top this up, I'm going to give Rachel, bless her, couldn't get into one of the breakout rooms, but we had an interesting conversation around getting this co-design right up front to agree some metrics, because CX isn't a single metric, it's made up of lots. So setting these core metrics up in advance could really help with service design right up front to allow it to trickle through the rest of delivery and ongoing after that. So it was really an interesting conversation. So thank you very much, everyone, for participating in this workshop and all of the others. I'm going to hand it back over to Kelly.
That's great. Thank you very much, Evan. Okay, so next steps. Martin, next slide, please. I'll be as quick as I can rattling through this. So what are we looking at, where we are in the process? So back in December 2024 through to February 2025, we carried out our initial market engagement, gathering feedback through surveys and early conversations. Moving then to July to September 25, we shared initial phase feedback. In August, we launched the information pack and accompanying an online survey. And through August and September, we held regional events, which focused on understanding geographic needs, potential lot-in, discussing delivery models, and exploring eligibility and wider application process. We are now in the phase running between November and December 25, where we are hosting a series of subject-focused deep dive sessions. You were on one of these sessions now. So in total, they've covered service design, which was done earlier on this week, and those slides will be available for you, and a recording of the webinar. The customer experience and quality one today, then the service mobilisation on the 19th of November, and finally data and evidence on the 4th of December. Next, in December 25, we'll invite organisations to register their expression of interest. Following that, from January to March 26, we will run a series of process-focused sessions. These will explore eligibility, application criteria, weightings, and practical guidance on putting together a bid. And then finally, in spring 26, the competition will formally open for round 1 areas. These will include the East Midlands, Yorkshire and Humber, the North West, and the West Midlands. So overall, this timeline shows how we support in the journey from initial engagement right through to competition launch, with structured opportunities to learn, engage, and prepare across each of those stages. And then next slide, I think, Martin, is our final thank you slide. Yes, it is. Thank you. We really appreciate how much you've shared today. We've heard the need for flexibility in our approach to quality, recognising that assessing case records aren't always the best approach. We've also heard a call for more understanding and celebration of good work. On training, we heard finding enough bespoke training can be difficult, and often that advisors are repeating the same things for CPD points. Coupled with this was the need for a more diverse training environment, such as an academy. Also, we've heard that this hasn't been enough time. We will think about how we can best capture the feedback from this session and any other insights you want to share with us. So please do keep an eye out for this in the future. Finally, thank you to you all for giving up your Thursday afternoon to spend with us. We really do appreciate it. Quick thank you to my colleagues as well who have supported the webinar, those that have presented, those in the background supporting with slides and breakout discussions, and everyone in between. We're really grateful to you all. As mentioned earlier, the slides will be sent to you via email and will also be available on the CBDA webpage, which I will pop in the chat for you now. Hopefully you'll be able to access that before you go. And then finally, with 2 minutes to spare, so I really did rattle through those last 2 slides. Just left me to say, hope you enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and thanks very much for attending and spending your afternoon with us. Much appreciated. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.